Welcome back, guys. I must say this is probably the most exciting and one of the most important videos that I've ever made, and that is introducing the new Gnarly Heads. It's a project that I've been working on since December 2018, and it all came about after a trip to the jungle in Nicaragua, and I struggled with poppers, and poppers have always been some of my favorite flies to fish, but it's always been a very big challenge finding the right popper to match the right hook. So what I started doing in back then was to try and find the right design for the hook to expose the hook to the maximum. It's always been a problem. Hookup ratios on poppers have always been a problem, and I've heard that from many people, from local fishermen to international fishermen all over the world. And I started studying the relationship between the hook and the popper head, and it was a very difficult thing to start with because the hooks are fixed sizes. Popper heads, there are a much wider range of hooks on the market, but to find, and then there are some popper heads on the market, but to find a head that match a hook or a hook that match a head has always been very challenging. So what I did was to start to make, besides making notes and almost writing a thesis on the relationship between popper heads and the hooks, was to do some calculations on existing hooks and the size of head that should go onto that hook in order to maximize hook exposure, and which will then also increase the hookup ratio on the popper. And I came up with various algorithms that I wrote on spreadsheets, where if you put a hook, take any hook, put the shank length and the gape width in there, it would give you about 28 different measurements. And those measurements are for 3D shape. This is the what I call the design area in which you should develop or design your popper for a specific hook with specific measurements, a specific gape and specific shank length. Now, if you take these algorithms and you enter, let's say, a hook with the same gape but a longer shank, it would stretch this out to fit that hook. If you take a hook with the same shank length but a wider gape, it would make the shape deeper and wider. There are a few different or a few very important measurements or relationships in poppers, between a popper and the hook that it goes onto. Besides the shank length, the width of the popper is very important. If it is too wide, you will lose hookup ratio. You will lose hook exposure, which means that you will lose hookup ratio. It can be narrower, but if you cut away too much body material or foam, you will lose performance because you are going to affect the buoyancy. So it was a very difficult thing to do in order to find that balance between performance, buoyancy, hookup ratio, or hook exposure, and all those things had to come together. There's various things that affect the performance of the popper besides the shape of the cup face. It's the buoyancy of the popper, of the amount of foam that you put on there. So you can't put too much on there. You have to make it as slim as possible. If you make it too slim, it's going to affect the performance, because it depends on the hook weight, and can that amount of foam carry the weight. It depends on where that foam is sitting on the hook. Is there more towards the back or more towards the front, which will affect the way that it floats on the water. There are many things like that, but I finally came up with the popper, the original Gnarly Head, which is this shape. There's the front. You can see that it's the corners are cut away. It's slimmer to the top. It's if you look at the height from the hook eye, where the hook eye will come out to the top, it's the same width. It's the same as the width. It should never be wider than what it is high, and that is where I came up with the first popper law. A popper should never be wider than what it is high unless the mounted hook gape is equal or greater than the width of the popper. So keep that in mind when you buy poppers, when you look at different poppers, and especially when you try and find a hook for the poppers. Make sure that gape is wide. There are there's different theories on poppers. On the length, I don't believe that you need a long shank hook for a popper. I don't believe that you need a hook with a kink in for a popper. I personally think that a normal standard kind of shank hook is the best for a popper, because if that is the hook that will give you the most gape and that will have very little leverage, especially when you find big fish. I did this whole exercise on both saltwater hooks and freshwater hooks. Now I'm not limiting myself to, and I didn't limit myself to only one brand of hook. I looked at various different hooks. I looked at Tehemko hooks, I looked at Gamakatsu hooks, obviously I looked at grip hooks, and looked at the different types of hooks and what will fit in, which hooks will fit these poppers. Gamakatsu SL12S's, the Tehemko's saltwater hooks, all those kind of hooks will fit these poppers. And I looked at bass hooks, various bass hooks. The same popper heads fit various hook sizes, or bass hook sizes. The grip hook is the 30012, which is a stinger type hook. Fine wire, you can see the size of the gape on that. It fits the TMC 8089, it fits the Gamakatsu B10S. So you can go and find your favorite brand of hook to use with these heads. Now there's a few very important features that we built into this popper. Things that you've probably never seen in any other popper. This popper, if you look at it from the front, you will see that there's a little mark there, and in the back, the tail cavity, there's another mark there. That is the path that the hook will follow through. It's at the bottom of the popper, not through the middle of the popper. The hook shank should never, or eye should never sit in the cup face, and it should never come out of the cup face. As soon as that happens, you're going to force the popper to go down, which means that you're going to close the hook gape. Any material below the hook shank will have an effect on your hook exposure and on your hookup ratio. So it comes out at the middle, at the bottom there. What I did was to make the bottom lip, or the base of the popper, very big or wide, so that the popper, the hook eye comes out in front of the popper, not inside the hook, inside the cup. The cup face, you can see, is clearly is above the hook shank, and it's quite deep. It will squirt water out to the top. It's not shaped as a normal round, symmetrical kind of cup face. It will scoop water and it's going to push it out to the top. We pulled the cheeks back a little bit. If you look at the cheeks there, it's pulled back a little bit. It will release water and air bubbles to the side. At the back, this area here is called the tail cavity. Now you will notice a very small little marker right there. If I turn it like that, you'll see there's a little bump there. That lines up with the deepest part of the tail cavity, where the hook shank comes out. From here back, the hook bend will start. So when you start to tie a popper, you always need to measure the hook and the head. Put the head on the hook and see where can you start to tie the tail. From which point can the tail be exposed, and from which point forward can you start to tie the material down. Now the popper is developed so that you first tie the tail and then slide the popper on, so that you can cover all the thread. After you tie this popper, you don't see any thread, and it is so that you can cover all the thread, and then you have the tail to the back. It's also designed, it's not the conventional cone-shaped popper. It's designed to cover the base of the tail so that you can have a much better profile in the popper, in the complete fly. So if you look at this, I'm not sure how clear that is, there we go. You can see where the hook comes out. So that little marker lines up with the deepest part of the tail cavity. So from that part, backwards or forward, you tie the material down, and backwards you can you keep the material exposed. Now the other important features, or what I see as quite an important feature, I quite like a big eye on a fly, on any fly, saltwater obviously, and streamer patterns. So you'll see that, notice that the tail, that the eye cavities or eye sockets are quite big on this fly, on this popper head. There are specific sizes for each size head. There are 4 sizes, by the way, that fits at the moment anything from a 6.0 all the way down to a 2.0 saltwater hook, and on the bass hooks from a 2 to a 8. Quite large eye sockets. If you look at the belly, you can see the eye sockets from the bottom. So they're slanted slightly down and backwards, so that so the eyes are visible. If you stick 3D eyes in there, they're very visible from the back and the front. And if you look at it from the back, you can also see that the eye sockets are visible. Another simple thing that was built into this is the concave shape at the top of the popper, over there. So that when you look down, you can see the eye of the hook. It's just to make the eye of the hook more visible, so that when you thread the tippet, it's easier to see it. It is exposed. The tippet will not get stuck inside the cup like with many conventional cone-shaped kind of poppers. So when you tie these poppers, there are a few important things that you need to look at. First of all, the basic principle of tying the poppers, whether it's fresh or saltwater, is exactly the same. On the back of the packaging, you will notice a little table with hook gape, shank length, and the eyes for the different sizes. Now, these are the minimum required hook specifications. You can go a little bigger if you want to. If you have a hook that doesn't exactly fit these specifications, then I always say go a little bit bigger, as long as the hook is not too heavy to carry the popper. So what I always do is I take a needle and I stick a hole through. I use quite thick needles, and I make sure I get the hole through from between the 2 hook markers, from the one to the other. You'll see that this is a white popper, and I painted it pink, a little bit pink, just a pink tint on the top. By the way, the poppers are available in white, black, orange, chartreuse, and purple. So this fits on a 8.0 or on a 6.0 hook. Now, if you look at the hook and you put the popper on the hook there, move it up a little bit, you'll see the tail tie marker right there, and I'm going to make a mark right there. When you look at that marker, that little mark there, from there towards the eye of the hook, you can tie your material down. From there backwards, your material can be exposed. I'm going to cover the hook shank with, by the way, I'm using a pink flat waxed grip thread, a 210 denier for poppers. Now, when I get to this point, I leave a little gap in the thread and then go back, just to give me an idea of where I am, where, you know, just to know where I can start, where I can stop, where I can start to tie things down. Now, to start, I'm going to, it's a saltwater popper. I like to put hackle in these poppers and tie that on top of the hook. Now, if you leave that gape, or that little gap rather, it's right there, you just, when you tie forward, just skip that gap so you have your mark all the time. And don't cut your stems off here. You need that as a filler towards the front when you slide that popper head over. And then wrap that towards the front, cut that there, and tie that in. That's the tail, or the hackle rather. Now at this point I like to tie 2 strands of flash. I just use normal pull or UV saltwater flashaboo. And I tie 2 strands on each side. About the same length as the tail. And another 2 on the other side. Wrap that forward to there, and you can tie that, or cut that excess away. And take your thread back. And now you can every now and then just take that popper, put it on the hook, and see if you're still on the right mark and in the right place there. Now the next step, and I like to keep this very simple, it's just to tie 2 pieces of grizzly marabou, that chickaboo, on the sides, and I like to match the colour. There. I tie 2 on each side, and 2 on this side. Still leave the gap there. Wrap that forward. Cut that excess away. Take the thread back. Now, just to get back to that little marker, you can see the tail is already where the popper starts, but we're going to move it, we're going to tie that tail even a little bit further so that it's exposed from inside the popper, which will leave a much better profile. Now what I usually do to finish that off, and I'm going to do that here as well, I'll take some marabou and palm it around the hook shank, and that always leaves a very nice, it's a very nice filler to just round it off. So I take a marabou feather, open it up, and you don't need much. I use one. I don't want to use too much marabou in this. The marabou tends to suck up a lot of water and make the fly heavy. Cut that off there. Take the thread back. I always take it back to the base and then make open wraps forward. I'll show you why just now. Take that out of the way. You wrap this forward. To the point where you want to tie it off. Just keep on teasing it out. Just grab a dubbing needle here. Keep on teasing that out. I guess I should have used my haggle pliers, but there's a pretty good stem on this, so to the point where that little mark is on the popper. Now you unwind those open wraps of your thread until you get to that point, and you just make one wrap over the stem to secure that. Hold the thread tight, pull all that material back, and now you can tie it down and close that little gap there. Okay, now at this point I normally take a bare hook with I took the needle out of the popper with no material, and I slide the popper head that I want to tie onto the bare hook. The reason for that is to help open that gap, that hole, just to stretch it a little bit, so that when it comes to sliding it onto the actual tail, you won't have any problems in doing that. So just get that through. That's where it sits on the bare hook, and you can see where that eye sits. It's not in the cup, it's totally exposed. I'll put that aside. Final step, what I do is to glue these things, I use a contact adhesive, which is like a yellowy, it's available pretty much everywhere. It's an elastic foam, elastic glue, and it takes a bit of time to dry. What I do here is to take a bit of this glue and put it on the hook shank there, and then I tie a piece of foam in, a strip of foam. And the reason for that is I like to have a little bit of movement on the head. I don't want to tie down with first of all with a glue that's going to get hard. If there's too much pressure or tension on that head, then it may crack. I like a little bit of movement on the head. So I take a strip of foam, just normal 2mm fly tying foam or craft foam, and you can use all your scraps for this. I tie it in right in the front, and this is probably the best filler you can get for any popper. And with open wraps tied down on top of the hook. and take your thread forward, and I then apply a little bit more glue. This is really nasty stuff to work with, but I found that it's the best for poppers. And you wrap this foam. You can stretch it a little bit, but with tight wraps, wrap it all the way to the front, to about there, and that is where you tie that off. Cut that foam off, tie it in properly, and whip finish. I apply most of the glue to the front half of the shank rather than the whole shank, because when you slide it on, it is going to push some of that glue backwards, like that. And then you slide the popper head on, and I like to kind of screw it on. Then you know you work that glue in everywhere. Pop that over, make sure it's in line, and there you can see the profile of the fly, of that popper. It's not that cone shape where you go all the way down to the hook shank and then the tail pops up. Now to finish this off, I use Grip 3D eyes. This is a 9.5mm, and I glue this on with the same yellow glue, contact adhesive. I don't use I don't trust the glue that these things come with. Take one, make sure it's in position in the eye socket. These 9.5mm eyes fit perfectly in the eye sockets of the poppers, of the extra large popper. And glue one on the other side. And then you can leave that for a while. And that is how you tie a gnarly head onto a hook. You can see the reason behind the design. You can see the eyes from below. Both eyes are visible from below. You can see the profile. It's totally different from the conventional cone-shaped poppers. Very easy to tie. All the tools are in place to select the right hook. The tile markers are there. The markers are on the popper where the hook shank should go through. So it's pretty easy to follow these instructions, because we will be posting more videos on how to paint them. We're working on some really cool coatings that we will also make available, hopefully, if all goes well, in 2024 sometime. We will post instructions on how to use that. I will definitely post some bass poppers, make some more videos. So please follow us, please subscribe to the channel, and check out the website scientificfly.com or gnarlyheads.com for more information on the poppers and some technical information.